shift you over a little bit. Sorry. That's it. Jesus.
Roll call.
Printed all
Yeah.
Anthony Moranti.
Here.
Kim Connor.
Here.
David Hardy.
Here.
Neil Tillman.
Here.
Neil Zuckerman. Here. And Peter Lewis.
And we have one vacancy. Approval of minutes from March 16th. Any corrections?
I had some typos, but I'm just going to give them to Linda.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have.
I'm just going to give you that. They're just marks all over.
Go ahead, Dave.
Sorry.
No, I'll give it to my man.
Okay.
It's just,
Motion
Oh,
to,
same stuff.
motion to approve the minutes of March 16th.
I'll make a motion.
All in favor? Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I can't vote, I wasn't here. Okay, thank you. We have a public hearing, Jeremy and Amy Sampson, 362 West Point Road, Garrison. You get the public notice?
Okay, the applicant is proposing a subdivision merger of 3 lots into 2 parcels by merging portions of the lot to be eliminated into the adjoining residential parcels. The 2 lots that remain after the merger presently contain single-family residences. As the size of the property conveyance exceeds 10% of the smaller of the original lots, this property transfer is deemed a subdivision pursuant to 112 of the town's land, and thus requires subdivision approval from the planning board. The property is located in the RR district.
Okay, thank you. Who's here on behalf of the applicants?
Larry Watson, Canadian Watson. And Mr. Sampson is here.
Okay, how are you?
Public notice pretty much said it all. There are three parcels. 2 are owned by the Schulas, 1.8 and 1.6, and they take essentially this configuration that you see here. Shula's residence parcel, and there's this sort of backward 7 that gets a little fat on the bottom. They have their house and their pool here. 1.8 acres, 1.6 acres is their second parcel. It's a vacant parcel. I think I have a line missing there, but essentially three parcels. The Sampsons own about 4/10 of an acre, a little bit under 4/10 of an acre. And the application is to take the 3 lots and reconfigure the internal boundaries into 2 lots. That the Schulas keeping most of their all of their first lot, most of their second lot, and that's what I didn't do. This one line is incorrect, but the Schulas keeping most of their second lot, combining it with their residence lot, and the Sampsons' lot being enlarged. So that's what you have now. If you approve the subdivision, essentially this second lot line will disappear. Shula's lot will get bigger. The Sampsons' lot will grow from 0.3 acres, 0.4 acres to 0.7, 0.8 acres, somewhere in between that. The exact numbers are on the plat that you can, if you need to refer to it. There's no physical action being planned. There's no activity being planned. It's just as Mr. Shula, I think, got up at the last meeting and spoke with you and had told you there are certain drainage structures and certain improvements that really service the Sampsons' property that are on the Shula's property. Schulas would like to be rid of them. Sampsons would like to control them. And this just makes more sense. Shula's lot neither lot comes anywhere near conforming, but both of the resulting lots come closer to conforming, although not anywhere near conforming.
Making it less non-conforming.
Less non-conforming. We're essentially doubling the size of the Sampson's lot, and we're close to doubling the size of, you could look at it as close to doubling the size of the residential lot. Not quite. So it's, again, we don't expect any physical activity to take place. We do expect that this the Sampsons will not use the small driveway at the southwest corner of their property in favor of an existing driveway that comes in a little further to the east and just makes more sense for them to use. So that's it. I mean, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer, but it's about as simple as they get, I think.
Questions from the board? Comments, Ron?
We have no comments, no.
From the public? No one? Anyone have no other comment at all? I'll ask for close the public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ron, you want to just give us a rundown?
It's described, it's a fairly straightforward lot line adjustment that's deemed a subdivision pursuant to your regs. Pursuant to the direction of the board, I provided you with draft negative seeker declaration and a draft approval resolution for your consideration for tonight's meeting.
Okay. Is there any reason we not do a negative declaration? I'll entertain a motion to that effect. Neil?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We have a resolution of approval. Any comments on that, Ron, or no?
Nope.
Motion to adopt?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item number 2, Christian Sorensen, 1,000 Old Albany Post Road, Garrison, old business. Ron, any comments on this?
No, the board previously conducted a public hearing. Necessary referrals were made. So you're now ready to consider action, and at the direction of the board, I've provided to the members a draft negative seeker declaration as well as a draft approving resolution. Again, this represents a lot line adjustment that's deemed a subdivision pursuant to your regs.
Anyone here, Ms. Sorensen here? No? Mr. Sorensen? Any final comment?
Gotta stand at the mic.
I don't know what I'm going to do with my Thursdays, my third Thursdays anymore. This has been before. Yeah, well, I know. Me too. But no, thank you. I appreciate all the work you guys did on this, particularly Ron Gaynor, who really helped out a lot for advice and
good
helping us
guy.
shepherd this thing through.
Okay, thank you.
So this, I believe, is yours.
For the files, probably.
Has it
Oh.
been signed by the county?
No.
You keep it. Got to be signed by the county, and
The county told me first the owners, then you, then the county.
okay, well then if you want to leave it here, that's fine.
If you leave it here, or leave it at the building department in town hall.
Yeah, you're local, bring it to town hall tomorrow.
Yeah, bring it to town hall tomorrow. It'll get a few signatures.
It requires a few things.
Yeah, right. Ron and I use the same pen.
So bring it to town hall tomorrow, and you'll find Linda. Very good.
Who dat? I'll entertain a motion for a negative declaration for the Sorensen site. Anyone? Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. And a approval resolution?
I'll make that motion.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Moving right along.
This is the fun part of the evening.
Well, you guys did all the work last month. Really? You were good, Kim.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you.
Item number 3, John and Kimberly Sabatini, 101 Dix Castle Road, Garrison. Consideration of negative declaration and resolution. Glenn? Oh, sorry,
Justin.
Jeffrey.
Okay. Justin Caker from Highlands Architecture. Was here last month, and the only thing outstanding was the short form EAF, which a few days after the meeting I filled out and brought to the building department. Have elevations to show, but you've seen them already. And we're just, at the point now where we've reduced our building footprint. We eliminated the second driveway and the construction access road, as you know, and approaching the project as we had originally discussed by demolishing part of the garage to make this happen. So right now we're seeking an amendment to the previously granted approval.
Ron, can you fill me in a little bit on the,
Yeah, as the board's aware, about a year ago, you granted an approval to a similar but larger project. They have greater plans proposed, the second driveway, much more significant site disturbances. That was given a conditional approval, but the approval was not, I think, finally executed. And the applicant has now reconsidered the proposal. You heard the reduced scope of the proposal a month ago. I believe you waived a public hearing at that time, recognizing the smaller scope and the prior effort that was made on the larger project. So you directed me to prepare draft seeker declaration and a site plan approval reso, and that's what you have before you for consideration tonight.
anything else before?
There's one thing I note on the draft approval reso I just picked up tonight is on the first page, in one of the whereases, I indicate that a public hearing was held, and the correct statement should be that that public hearing was waived by the board. So I'll correct that if the board wishes to act tonight.
Okay. So there's no reason why we can't ask for a negative deck?
No.
Hi, Steve. Entertain a motion to give a negative declaration to Sabatini's.
I'll make that motion.
Second? All in favor? We have a resolution of approval. Motion on that? Second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Ready to go on those, man? I got to check.
Yes, ma'am.
I wish you wouldn't color them in. That'd give me something to do on the weekend. Thanks.
No, I don't think so.
Ready?
Yeah.
As you know, we were here last month and discussing some of the changes that the board would like to see in the plan. And we would like to have our public hearing scheduled. We got very close last month, but didn't quite make it. Since then, we've revised the plan further, which I'll talk about in a moment. And Mr. Gaynor and I rewalked the property a second time in the intervening time. And while the plan stays largely unchanged, there was one major plan that we did is we had all of the handicap area here southwest of the proposed building.
You want to turn that so we can see it?
Well, that's why I gave you those individual things. Then the public can't see it too. I'll have to bring two the next time. So
You're pointing at things.
The handicap access is, the handicap parking was all situated in this rectangular branch off the main access and drive and parking lot. And there was concern that it wasn't close enough to the building on the part of the board, and there was concern on our part that it was invading the facility. And we believe and still believe that we have met code with that parking lot, but nonetheless, we met with Mr. Gaynor, and we thought we came up with a reasonable compromise. We extended this entryway so a car can continue through this parking lot with somebody who really needs a wheelchair or something, come up around. We put one of the spaces up in this area that Mr. Zuckerman pointed out when we had the planning board site walk. That's done at some sacrifice to the quality of the garden, but it about halves the distance to the house, to the building, excuse me, that's not a house. We feel, we think that accomplishes the goal of getting somebody who is more handicapped, let's say, closer, and we do have surfaces that meet code. They're rollable surfaces, they're handicap accessible surfaces. It's an invasion into the garden. We try to keep it as minimal as possible. Mr. Gaynor has suggested 2 spaces. 2 spaces will knock out an array of trees and really make it very difficult up there. Difficult in the aesthetic sense of having an impact on the garden more than the one that we're talking about here. So that was one of the issues, and that is our response. We think it's positive, and we think it's a reasonable compromise that the garden can live with. The second issue was whether or not we would be presenting to the public at the public hearing a full set of plans, and that was where the vote was close. As I mentioned last month, we have a public hearing scheduled for next Monday night with the ZBA for the variance that we're seeking to vary the height of the building. We have a tower on top of this building. It's 7 feet. The highest point on the tower is 7 feet higher than it's allowed to be. It's triangular in shape. It's 0 at the 7-foot point. It comes down to about 8 feet at the base, maybe 9 feet. I don't remember exactly. It's about 36 square feet of site that will be visible from about a half a mile away on the ridge of the park. Other than that, we don't believe it's visible from any other publicly accessible land. So we have applied for that variance. I'm obviously hopeful that we'll get it. I think we presented some reasonable reasons for its approval to the zoning board, which they will debate next Monday. But nonetheless, we'll have an answer at the end of, we fully expect we'll have an answer at the end of that meeting and be able to come back with what was termed a full picture for the public to consider it here, your board meeting. So with that, I respectfully request that you set a public hearing for next month.
Yeah, before I call for that, board members have anything to ask at the moment? Anyone? Neil?
It's a brief comment to you, the stone crop management, your architect. I'm sure I speak for most of us, if everyone on this board, when I say thank you for the accommodation on the handicap space. I would not know if out of 67 acres of space is an invasion of the aesthetic nature of it, but I will tell you that it's an important accommodation, and I think a lot about Pat Sexton, our former board member, who was in a wheelchair, and I think she would appreciate that we have thought carefully, and you have thought carefully about that change, so thank you very much.
The only comment I have, speaking of wheelchairs, until a while ago, there were 2 people in my house that were in wheelchairs, and we visited the place about 3 years ago, and we had to turn around and leave. Neither one of them. So I think that, to me, that's a real, besides the fact that Pat is very important. So if there's any reason not to ask for a set of public hearing, they're going to the zoning board next week, so.
I think it's been a good compromise. Glenn, I appreciate it. I know I was kind of picking on you about this last week. No, seriously, I appreciate you making the effort.
Thank you.
Maybe just for the future, Ron, when you get these kinds of visits on topics like this that are a little squirrely, maybe we're more than happy to go along with some of the,
It resulted from last meeting's discussions, and Glenn and I got the obvious charge to attempt to deal with it, and so we did.
great. I mean, I would have liked to have been there.
Yeah, I hear you.
So, yeah, thank you. I think it's great.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I'll ask for a motion to set public hearing for next month.
I'll make a motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
And we've been here several times and have several discussions and site visits and stuff, and so I would also respectfully request that you instruct Mr. Gaynor to prepare a resolution for approval at the end of the meeting for your consideration at the end of the public hearing next month.
Was a site visit done?
We did a site visit. Yes.
That's what started the discussion.
Okay.
Yes.
I've been so many lately.
Oh, I know.
Okay,
And we'll know about the variance.
yeah, that's what I'm saying, that's why we, direction, a motion to direct Ron to prepare the negative declaration and the resolution?
I'll make the motion.
Can we do both, Steve?
Yeah, you could do both. The difference is going to be, you haven't held your public hearing, so there's a lot of information that you're going to need to, exactly right. It'll be a draft, and then
Right.
you'll either put it over till next month if you need to make changes.
Right.
If they're minor changes, you can adopt it as amended on the spot, and if Ron is pressing enough to do it just right, you can adopt it that night.
Okay.
Right.
Anyone to that motion?
I will make the motion that we prepare a draft in
Seeker and-
anticipation, seeker in anticipation that everything goes well with the public hearing.
Second?
I think Neil already made the motion.
Oh,
so
I'll
you take
make
the
the
second.
Kim did it. Kim said it better.
Can we discuss it then for 1 second?
Yeah, sure.
So I think I'm fine with us doing this, but over the last couple of meetings, this has been a request by Mr. Watson frequently and I understand the point, you're trying to accelerate things, makes sense. You guys want to get started for the summer, we get that. But as a matter of course, I'm not sure I love the notion of having resolutions prepared ahead of what is possibly the most important thing we get, which is public comments. I have a little bit of a tummy rumble about the concept. I'm okay if we think in this particular case, but I'd like this not to be the standard move we always do, because I think it gives the perception of short shrift to the public comments. And I know that's not what we intend to do, but I don't want that being the perception.
I agree with that.
I agree, but some of these we've been through and we've worked them over. I agree basically with you, Neil, and some of these we've worked over and over and over, and sometimes we like to move on because we do get, as tonight, other times we've had meetings where we've had 8 and 9, plus 2 or 3 public hearings on top of it. You know, it does get weary.
I'd just like to tell you, my general comment to a client who's coming in with a pretty clean-cut thing is it's 3 meetings, it's completeness, it's public hearing, it's really 4 meetings, it's completeness, site visit, public hearing, and resolution. And I do ask for that on 2 different occasions, when we've been over and over and over it and we beat these things to death, which in my view we've done, maybe that's not such a politic way to put it, and when they're obvious, like the Sampson one, where there's really no real, even Mr. Gaynor didn't have any comments on that.
I'm sorry, I take exception at that. I don't think we've been over and over and over. You just presented us for the first time the change in the handicap piece.
Maybe I exaggerated.
Let me finish. Which this board, almost to a person, took incredibly seriously. And it took us 2 meetings and the site walk to make clear how important this was to this board. So I don't think we worked you over and over again. In fact, I was thrilled when I received in the materials last week this letter from your office by Mary about it. So I don't think we've done it over and over again.
I apologize for my mischaracterization. I think this thing was thoroughly vetted, and that's why I want to move it forward.
We have a motion on the floor. Is it all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
That was just for the negative deck. We need one
Right.
for the draft resolution also. Motion for draft resolution?
I will make that motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. My brain hurts.
Thank you. And
Did we
thank you,
make a
Mary.
motion for the public hearing? We did.
Yes, yes.
No,
That
no,
was
no, this-
first.
even I, at my younger age, cannot read this. So there's, come on.
Wait a minute, Mary.
To quote Peter Lewis, ooh.
That's what it is. They don't want us to read it.
This will be a very good placemat. It's not.
Which one are we?
Kind of no point giving us this. We can
Yeah.
This is,
This is just more
OSPAN.
paper to throw away. So this is Stonecrop is done.
This is just trash.
Oh, wait, it's this old span. Yeah, it's no sense because I can't read it.
Mary, if I may speak for the board, there's a universal belief that this is not readable by human eyes. At least, it's not supposed to be read. Did you hear that, ladies and gentlemen? It's not supposed to be read.
It's just for the color.
I told you, leave the color out. Give me something to do. We are doing old span now, in case somebody is wondering. Old span.
All span now, yes.
Where's Bob? I gotta make sure he.
He's right there.
Look at the king back there.
We got a desk.
He looks very important, doesn't he?
He is important.
Yeah, he signs our paychecks,
That's right.
such as they are.
I'm gonna take a picture of Bob.
Public service, Andy.
So we're just changing the order of...
Yes, yes.
Are you starting?
I'll go to start. I'm not gonna-
Okay, old
I'm going to let Mary tell you about the changes to the plan, what's involved in the plan. But just to let you know, we have met with the, we've met with the Conservation Board, we've met with the DEC, Mary has met with the DEC, well, we both met with the Conservation Board. On Monday night, we have the Conservation Board adopted a conditional approval of a permit. The basic conditions are that we get the DEC permit and a couple of other notes be added to the plan as far as they're concerned. I believe that, I know that Mr. Garfinkel, the wetlands inspector, has issued a letter to that effect or an email to that effect to Mr. Moranti. I got a copy, I think Mr. Gaynor got a copy. And so there have been a number of changes that have been incorporated into the plan. We'd like that Mary will point them out to you and tell you why, and tell you what changes were made, and then hopefully you'll see fit to approve this plan as well. Thank you.
Okay, so I know that you received the drawings dated April 6th. Tonight, we brought drawings that are dated April 14th, because we submitted back to the Conservation Board and to the Planning Board for this month's meetings. As Glenn said, we were there on the 18th. But after we submitted those drawings, I was able to meet with the DEC, and Miguel Quismondo is here. He's the architect for the project. We walked the site with Kelly McKean from the DEC. She reviewed the plan, we reviewed it in the site that we submitted to the Conservation Board. That plan was a revised plan that we first submitted to the board, incorporating all of their requests. She then made further requests. So the plans that we brought tonight, dated the 14th of April, are incorporating the Conservation Board first meeting and the DEC additions. And I guess I'll go through those plans regarding the wetlands first, and then we'll touch on some of the changes to the site plan since it was last approved. The wetland buffer follows this line. I can't actually see because I... Here's the wetland buffer line. No, I need to go, comes like this. First, she came out to verify the wetland buffer plans.
You got to speak into the mic.
Yeah. She came out to verify the wetland buffer flags, additional flags were set in December of 16. She came out, she modified one flag, so this wetland buffer was adjusted 15 feet out, and that's reflected on your drawings. And an orchard is planted today. There is a second set of fruit trees that are planted in this area. So per her recommendations, these have been moved onto the property and inside the setback. She requested that the owner put up a deer fence, which is following the inside the setback line. It's an 8-foot, 8-inch fence, because she asked us to raise the bottom of the fence 8 inches to allow turtles from the wetland to come up into the drier areas for nesting. So it's a welded wire mesh or a high tensile steel mesh, like a cattle fencing. And they are on steel posts. The steel posts within any of the restricted areas are direct driven. If conditions call for it, for example, like gate posts or corners, outside of the restricted areas, they will be set in concrete. The fence line comes around here to get around this utility structure. It does jog into the setback. That'll go to 6 feet, which is allowed in the setback, and then come back up and tie to the retaining wall. Now we get to the modifications to the plans that were originally presented. Had a wider asphalt area inside the buffer. There was parking. That parking was then removed. Through all the process with the board, bus parking was added to the plan, and additional parking spaces were added to the plan. That pushed a retaining wall out here to deal with all the site grading. The security fence, actually there was a wall that originally came down like this with the security gate here. The security gate and the wall has been pushed back about 40 feet further from the wetland buffer. These walls on the front face are around 3 feet high. In your set, there is an elevation with dimensions on it. There's a sliding steel gate here and a 6-foot gate up here that closes the loop around the property to keep the deer out. Working with the DEC and the Conservation Board, an additional wetland mitigation plan was added to provide native planting hedgerow along the open sections between clearings and the native vegetation, a wooded area. There's when you went out the last time, you commented that the building was very visible. They have since planted a heavy evergreen screen along this building and along here. That is different than their original plan. There's probably twice as many plantings out there than their first submission that was approved. And then in my plan, we do a restoration of the stream bank and stabilization, again with choir logs and native plantings, seeding, and erosion blankets on any slope greater than a 1-on-3. The entrance is exactly in the same configuration within the setback area, and the road is slightly realigned. Instead of pushing out here and coming in, it's now straightened out to come into the center of the parking area. The proposed caretaker residence was initially shown in this area, where actually it was a little further off. The existing building, house is here. We had shown parking in here in one version, and the house here. We've now pushed it back a little bit further to settle it into the landscape and have a nicer orientation with the entrance to this building and tucked that employee parking in this area would be less visible. There's a beautiful specimen, I believe it's an apple. So we wanted to not impact that with putting parking in the building in this area. So we're really just cleaning it up and easing the slope up to the natural elevation and staying away from grading around that tree as much as possible. I believe the gravel access drive was here on the original plan. We have, this is an all asphalted parking lot up to, I think it's this line, or no, this line here, where they're putting in a concrete paver, and the paver from, this actually, I'm sorry, is rendered incorrectly. This interior, the pavers that are on the interior courtyard are now coming out to a landing that's in line with the end of the original back of the building, and then this is a concrete paver in that section, and this is all handicap accessible. It's 2 to 4 or 5, I don't even think it gets as steep as 5%. It's like 4, I think. And I think that's, we didn't, okay, well, one of our original plans was modifications 2 versions ago, or 3, was we submitted a request to the DOT to realign the entrance, put in a new culvert. We worked with the Conservation Board and the DEC to have a bottomless culvert here. It went in, but it was denied because we do not have enough clearance off of this property line to meet the criteria of the curve and then the tangent piece of curve you have to have before this property line comes 90 degrees to the center line of the road. So they won't allow us to make that change, so we're going to keep the existing alignment. The client wants to remove, there's like a gravelly stucco finish on the top interior facing sides of the walls and then the edges that they want to remove. There's no stucco on the stream faces. One of the notes that I've developed since Tuesday night and sent to the DEC for approval was the placing of tarps, the procedure for removing that stucco so that it doesn't come into the stream. It's just going to be manually scraped off, and they're going to leave it in its unfinished concrete finish so that it goes with the rest of the area, and it'll be a lot less visible because the current finish is very white. It's very visible as you're driving past the site, so those will mellow out and disappear a little bit better. The other note that they asked us to develop was a narrative about the construction of this section, sequence of construction sequencing, and the erosion control measures to be put in place as we're doing the different pieces. That's also gone to the DEC for approval yesterday. And the other last note was a note about the mowing schedule. We're proposing within the restricted areas just to mow once a year. The question is whether it's late fall or early spring. DEC has a typical for grassland birds that you don't mow from April 23rd to August 15th, but I think it's meant to be a grassland meadow, and so once a year should be sufficient, and that's really to keep the succession of trees and shrubs from really pushing forward in those spaces. I think that was the only note.
I just want to, for those of you that remember, we were talking about a box culvert because the Wetlands Commission asked for a gravel base. And that kind of played into the idea of realigning this a little bit better. But when we ran into the when we ran into the stone wall with regard to the DOT permit and meeting their specifications, we really thought we were at kind of a hard place to be and deal with. So, but this culvert would have had to been restricted anyway, just because of the flood flows that might occur in what we were proposing. And there, in fact, there is enough accumulated sediment in the bottom of that existing culvert so that they do have a natural surface. Now, it's, obviously the bottom of the culvert's below that, but we did discuss that quite a bit with the Conservation Board last Monday, and they're happy. They're okay with it. I don't know they characterize it as happy, but they're okay with it. I think that's our whole story.
Comments from the board?
So you said there was a memo from the Conservation Board, which Ron has. Ron, did you get a memo from the Conservation Board? So I guess my question is, so the Conservation Board approved the orchard and the trees that are in the wetland buffer?
It turns out that there's an agricultural exemption for that. That was suggested to us to Mary by the DEC representative.
The other thing, just over all this time, the original permit, the person in charge of the permit and the regional director have moved on. I know that Miguel and other people from the site met with the DEC, and I don't know the history of how, if the orchard happened with the approval of the DEC on the site, but there is an agricultural exemption on this property, which Kim McKean pointed out to us and said there's no violation. They didn't clear or grade the property, and they planted everything by hand. So there was no disturbance. Any trees that were cut down, the stumps were left. So they're...
They didn't clear cut. They didn't cut down big. There weren't big trees to cut down, which would have been a problem. And the exemption is available to the property. It's not really assigned to the property. I mean, it's a thing we can take advantage of.
Why is it there? I'm just curious. Is it because of...
It's an agricultural exemption.
What is that?
Well, I can't tell you exactly what the agricultural props. If you go to the DEC site and you say, do I need a permit, you will go to the exempt practices and it's listed.
I'm just
similar to Philipstown. Philipstown has a list of regulated activities and a list of unregulated activities. And it's parallel to that. This is an activity that is not regulated and for which a permit is not required.
Even though it's in a wetland, okay. So
it's in a wetland buffer.
In the buffer, it's allowed.
Okay.
Did they issue a notice of non-jurisdiction? Is that how they did it?
The Conservation Board?
Well, the DEC will do that. Did they issue a notice of non-jurisdiction, which frequently comes with the agricultural exemption?
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't, they received these drawings on Monday morning. So they just got assigned the DEC.
Okay, so you wouldn't have gotten one. You wouldn't have gotten one yet, but if that's what you get, we'll keep that on file, and that'll be great. Okay.
I have a second question, which is, did the Conservation Board approve the daffodils in the front?
The daffodils over here?
Yeah, because they made
They'll be gone.
They will.
I mean, this entire embankment is planted with shrubs and seeded. If a daffodil survives,
Because I know you took
it's like
out the
how you still have
irises that were
tulips
there.
in your
So
garden.
I know you took out the irises that were there because they were not the right plants for this, so I just.
That was done by somebody else, those plantings, so I don't know. I haven't seen whether the yellow irises are there still, but it's marked on the plan that they must be removed. And the daffodils are going to go away because by the time they install choir logs and shells for all these strings of shrubs, if a daffodil survives.
She said don't bother, did she?
She didn't specifically say they needed to be removed, the DEC, but yes.
But the Conservation Board didn't have an opinion?
The biology, they didn't specifically bring those up.
Did
I
you-
mean, if they, I don't think that there's going to be anything left of them, but,
Yeah, we're just, due diligence here, right?
What's the relationship to that agricultural exemption and the property that's deemed agricultural property under the ag and...
There are two different things.
I understand what I mean. It's the first time I've heard of this ag exemption. So someone has another piece of property in town, a significant piece of property, they could plant an orchard or something to that effect and get an ag exemption?
in a restricted area.
Yeah,
And
that
and I'm not sure if
Just
it's
in a restricted area, then the buffer, but not in the wetlands itself?
I don't know if it's allowed in the buffer. We don't have that condition. We have it only in the buffer.
It's not directly parallel to the agricultural, the relief that the zoning board, that the zoning law gives to agriculture, and it doesn't have to do with the $10,000 a year of sales that you have to do to get into an agricultural district. It's just separately apart from that. In fact, frankly, we just stumbled upon it because we expected we had some trouble, and then when the DEC person came out, pointed out that it was available for this piece of property, among a lot of others. We met the conditions necessary, and so the presence of the orchard didn't get to be the problem that we were anticipating.
Okay. Ron, there was a sheet here, if I can find all this paperwork, with 15 questions. Do you feel they've all been satisfactorily answered?
I'm not sure I know what you're referring to.
That's our letter to you
Yeah.
in the beginning of March.
Thanks, Neil.
Yes. Looks like it's...
My question, I bring it up because as Mary is delineating all these changes, I'm just wondering if we're anywhere near ready for a negative deck and approval.
These were comments that we had provided in a previous technical review that had been evidenced on updated plans.
And then your feeling of they've been,
Right, they corrected the technical issues that I had previously raised.
okay. Does anyone else have any questions? Neil?
At the risk of bringing up an old topic, I don't recall, since there's been some time since the site visit, I can't remember, was it December, November? Before Election Day. I remember it was the weekend before election, so it's quite a while ago. So remind me where we were with the discussion of the volume of traffic going into this building and where or whether we were going to put a note tied to that volume of traffic that was expected. They had put together in a memo a schedule, I recall. It would only be open these hours. It would only be these number of visitors. Is everyone recalling what I'm talking?
Yes.
It's been several months, and I realize it's been 6 months probably. So.
We responded to that
Right.
with a detailed statement of use,
Yes.
which I would expect is incorporated into the record.
That's what I want to. That's what I'm raising is because I clearly, as I look on the site plan, I don't see notes related to those pieces. So where is that going to be captured and tied to this application?
Again, it's in your public record.
There's no note on the plan?
Right, there's no...
I don't see
We
any.
could certainly add a note to the plan referring to the statement. That's no problem at all.
Then there's no issue.
Okay, anyone else? Peter?
No.
Neil? I'll entertain a motion to adopt a negative declaration.
I'll second the motion.
No, you're firsting it.
You're firsting it.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Resolution of approval. I'll entertain a motion.
Yeah, I was going to include that one amendment that was just discussed, the addition of the note,
Oh.
to identify the statement of use and occupancy.
You might want to put an additional whereas in there that refers to that statement of use as well.
And also, we're going to get the notice of non-jurisdiction. Is that right? Neil seemed to believe that there needed to be a notice of non-jurisdiction, which you were
should
going
get
to...
something
Yeah.
back from the DEC.
That says it's okay.
It'll either be a notice of non-jurisdiction by them or something like that.
The draft resolution that you have in front of you does recognize that DEC must grant an approval for the wetland activities. They still need a DEC permit. If it's not clearly referenced in that, we can have follow-up discussions with DEC to make sure that's addressed.
So I'm just saying, just to have it
So
on record.
they will obtain a
Some
permit from
response
DEC,
from them,
right?
We'll certainly try, see what we can get out of them. If that's a standard thing, we have no problem with it. I don't really, I don't want to be chasing around and coming back for
Well, it's your proof that you've got this agricultural exemption, so we'd
yeah,
like
but
to...
the agriculture,
It's going to be stated, she said that they would be giving us, the permit will list a set of guidelines
Okay.
within and description of what's allowed,
Steve, how's
It
that
should.
stand?
And again, it's a modification to an open permit. It's not a new permit. We've submitted for changes to an open permit, which doesn't expire until next year, I think.
we'll ask them
But they
about that. If they issue it, we'll be happy to turn that in. We'll ask them if that's something they don't customarily do, would it be satisfactory if they mentioned that the activities noted on the plan included an orchard?
Sure, fall within the guidelines of.
Yeah,
And that will then be included in the record.
yeah.
Right.
Is everybody satisfied on that? Okay, motion to approve resolution.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Also second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, we're going to skip to number 7 on the agenda.
I'm going to run the rest of it.
Yeah, sure. All right, we're going to go to number 7, Rockman Berquist, 67 Old West Point Road. Is anyone here to represent them? Glenn?
James here?
No,
No, James isn't here.
that's James Hartford. Apparently he's not here. I did have communications with him today. He obviously has the sidewalk memorandum. He didn't offer any indication, pro or con, that he would be here or not.
So we really can't discuss anything with.
I guess the board can acknowledge receipt of the sidewalk comments. I presume you've endorsed them all. And as I said, as of today, I've passed them on to the applicant's representative.
All right, so we shall hold this in abeyance till next month?
Yes.
That makes our part easier, right?
All right, to number 6, Old Span.
Oh, no, we got Allspan already.
I'm sorry. Hudson Highlands. Got too many marks on my Hudson Highlands Reserve.
Light in here, yeah.
I know, lights. Yeah, yep, sorry.
Good evening. Rick O'Rourke, the attorney for the applicant. We had a brisk and good exercise walk, I guess, about 2 weeks ago.
That's your opinion.
Well, we could have used a couple oxygen tanks along the way, I think, but in any event, I think we all learned a lot from the site walk, and I know this is, as with just about every other property that is in excess of 100 or 150 acres, there's always something that you're learning. And obviously, as a result of that walk, we, Glenn, in collaboration with Yuli, the owner of the property, we took into account what we observed and what we think those members of the board and Ron, who was there, observed, and tried to see how we could possibly incorporate some of the thoughts that we got from various representatives of conservancies as well as members of the board. And with that, we continue our quest in having a collaborative effort here in trying to develop a property that reflects what you want by way of engaging with the conservation subdivision provisions of your ordinance, which is something that's important because obviously this is the first one that you've ever done. And in some respects, it's good to be a guinea pig. Sometimes it's not. But nevertheless, knowing that that is a component to all of that, knowing that the board does want to work collaboratively with us, we think that, and Glenn will take you through it, we think what we've tried to do here is, in light of what we learned, in light of the comments, in light of the recognition of trying to do the right thing, moving this thing forward without, and as I said, using the word collaboratively, we've incorporated some thoughts and suggestions that I think will move this along very nicely. And so with that, what I would like to do is if, Glenn, you want to take us through some of the adjustments we've made?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to take you through one sheet at a time here. There's several sheets, but I want to give you a clear picture of the effort that was made in the last couple of weeks to try and make this plan remove some of the objectionable things that we all saw during the site walk.
Glenn, before you get started, I'd just like to get some advice from either Ron or Steve, because there's so much to this.
Right.
And we saw so much this week. When they're talking now, what should we be looking at as an overall macro picture of this? I mean, there's going to be a lot of details. There have been a ton of details. And what should we be looking at right now?
Well, obviously, the board understands where you've been to date, right? You've been through the conservation analysis. You've adopted a conservation findings. The applicant at this point has presented, prior to the site walk, had presented a schematic master plan, which formed the basis for the site walk. Everybody recognizes that that site walk was an experience. There were numerous things identified that felt should be respected as the plan evolves, so that from our side, and so too the applicant, we expect that schematic master plan will undergo some revision. In the sidewalk comments that I produced on the board's behalf, I tried to summarize those issues that were most significant. And the board has that now, and several members have commented to finalize the document. So at this point, you've gone through a coordinated environmental review. You're now lead agency. You'll formally acknowledge that when you're prepared to move seeker forward. But in order to move seeker forward, you want to get to a plan that you believe respects the issues that came out of the conservation analysis, as well as your physical observations during the sidewalk. And I anticipate that the applicant tonight is going to walk through some of those changes based on what everybody saw 2 weeks ago. And eventually, a plan will evolve that you'll move forward through the environmental review process.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, Glenn. Yeah, okay, Steve, please. No,
Go
that's
ahead.
quite all right.
I think Rob summed it up nicely, but to just make it just a little plainer, there are three main things that the board should be focusing on at this point. First off is secret review. Now, a lot of that may have been taken care of when you did your conservation analysis, but a lot of issues were raised, and you're going to want to put them to bed as you go through the plan and look at it. Are they mitigating potential environmental impacts to the maximum extent practicable, both as far as proposed development, preservation, and lot layout? Second is density. Density is a big issue right now, and that has two prongs to it. The first is deciding lot count, and the second is deciding if you're going to give them a bonus as far as the number of lots that come. The bonus is dependent on how you view the public amenities, the open space and such that they're providing. Is that going to be sufficient to warrant getting the bonus? And the third is lot layout. You've identified what's important as far as environmental preservation goes, and you're going to want to look at what they're proposing as far as how the lots are shaped and where they're located, and make sure that the layout of the lots respects and protects the environmental elements of the plan, which they set out to protect and preserve to begin with. So as we go forward, those are kind of the three big overview issues to look at, and as Ron says, you're going to drill down as you move forward and the plans develop.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, Glenn. Go ahead.
Thank you for that. I just want to add to that. Just like you wanted to be careful about the conservation analysis, getting that stuff all out in front at first before you had to move along. before you were in a position to move along or had to move along and make a decision, we also would like to get to a point where we have a general layout, which Steve mentioned, of the way we're going at this subdivision. That's going to be before we have to start facing the detailed engineering issues, although we have faced many of them already. So, as has been said a couple of times here, it was very obvious that there was some problems with that plan, and that you walked the roads that you walked. So what we did, the first thing we did is took the road layouts that we had looked at over a course of time and sort of evaluated them. The one you walked is the one in dark blue. And you'll see it's a heavy dotted line followed by a heavy solid line, and continued as thin lines in some places. The key here, with one noted exception, that's maybe not a noted exception. The key here is that the heavy dashed lines are construction in constrained lands that we deem unavoidable. We deem that unavoidable because we think there's lots of problems with going out to East Mountain Road. We've talked about those before, and we know there's a very strong desire and lots of problems for people not to go out to Horton Road. So that leaves us coming in for Route 9, and it's no getting, in our view, it's just unavoidable. When we went to solid blue, those are disturbance or construction of roads on constrained land that we think is probably avoidable. And where it's a thin line, we don't think there's any significant problem, although you might see a little spot here and there where we go over a short stretch of steep land. So we looked at three plans. We looked at one that Mr. Gross, our planner, had made, which has significant steep slopes that he goes through, some obviously easier land that's not constrained, steep slopes, not constrained, would be unavoidable in his plan. This is really unavoidable in his plan. And then we looked at an alternate that was looked at earlier on, which paralleled the ancient road, and that was also on steep slopes, but it was avoidable. So the next page is really a repeat of I think we can skip passing that one out. This is just to give you another idea of what you walked, maybe a little bit clearer idea of what you walked that Sunday. We met at the end of Horton Road. We walked up the old road past the existing houses, past the existing barn on the old road. And when we got to the intersection of this new road, we walked to the east and south to look at the equestrian area. Then we made our first climb and hit our first spot. We then doubled back, walked down, got back onto the road and walked clockwise around the loop, and then veered off. We spent a lot of time with this spur road around the lake, discussed the extra 40 feet of buffer. We came back, we walked the rest of this, kept going clockwise around the loop, hit a spot where it was steep, but actually we probably walked up a little higher to avoid that. Got back on it, walked to the intersection, and we made a choice to continue around this way and really we hit a block of stone right here at the northernmost point of the loop, a little flat area, and then we were on steep rock for all of this way back to the point where we first hit it. So that gives you, hopefully that gives you an idea. Again, solid lines may be avoidable, solid heavy lines may be avoidable, dashed heavy lines probably not avoidable. I'm going to take that back. I'm going to say they're not avoidable based on my previous explanation. And the thinner lines, no need to avoid. We also point out here that we had a total of 185,000 square feet of disturbance, anticipated disturbance on 20 to 35% slopes, which is constrained but allowed. And then another 106,000 square feet of disturbance on steep slopes. That's over 35%. So it's a total of 292,000 square feet of disturbance. We cleaned the plate, took a fresh approach, decided what we wanted to avoid and I just need to, because I'll come back to this, the loop came about for two reasons. One, the identification of the old road as something that is of historic significance and disturbance on that old road to be avoided. And the second resulted from our walk with Hudson Highlands Land Trust, which asked us to keep the development as contained as possible with an obvious border, that border being the road, because it would be easier policing and enforcing, another poor choice of words, enforcing would be easier if the development was encompassed in the road. It turned out to be more of a problem than we had anticipated and resulted in having to move the roads out and up onto the steep slopes in order to come up with a fairly, almost totally enclosed development. So we cleaned our plate and we took a fresh look. This one, nuts. It's okay. This one, we took a fresh look. We still have the unavoidable steep slopes that you had before. But now, we get to this point, which is on that plateau above the rise up from Route 9, but before we hit that first steep slope on our walk around here, we hit a plateau where we crossed the old, where we were about to cross the old road. If you had looked to your left, you saw that existing house. We decided to make that a T-intersection, and we thought that might be problematic but we knew we could get trucks around there and we didn't have to make another gouge into the steep slopes if we were to do a T-intersection. So then we started combining the T-intersection. Well, where's the T go? Then it struck us that we could take this house and we could make that house the maintenance part of the development, but it would be the maintenance building where they could keep their repair shop and everything for the homeowners association. So we would have a little spur road go down to a parking lot down there, which justifies in our mind a T. So then we move one way. We have the road. We have all clear. We moved off of this steep slope. We move above this steep slope. We do cross a little bit right in here, which I dashed in with a pen because we forgot to do it before. We moved the intersection to the spur road slightly so it would go through less amount of steep slopes. We pushed it right to the edge, but again, keeping it as far away from the lake and developable area as possible, which in turn allows us to move the houses back further from the lake. Getting back to the main road, we continue. We hit one short spot of steeper slopes. Then we continue back to the equestrian center. And of course, we'll maintain this emergency access route, and it will be just that, an emergency access route, so we don't believe we'll have a significant problem with those emergencies. Everybody thinks about an oil truck turning over and a tree falling down and a house being on fire, and then you can't get out. So we will have two ways out. We chose to move the road to the northwest because the lots would be on the inside of the developed area. It wouldn't be a loop, but they would be on the inside of the road and away from the eased area. It also kept the road and the construction involved with it away from the historic road. Then this was actually something that Anthony Sunga had when one of the first plans was a cul-de-sac road. It wasn't quite this alignment that went up here. And we moved that away and put it on that lower portion. And there were several of us, myself included, who didn't brave that steep slopes like like these paratroopers guys do. But we took the more gentle route And
Yes, you
basically,
did, and duly noted.
right. That's essentially where that road was.
That's where you were.
Those
right?
of
You
us
were
who
down-
took the,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and so we kept it, again, we kept it away from the historic road. We could have put it on the upper edge here. We decided not to do that. Again, so we could keep the lots on the inside of what's sort of the loop. And it's not, like I say, it's not a loop.
Can you mind if I interrupt you with one question about that? Then, because Neil's got the map here. So, are the house sites? Would the house sites be moved, I guess, closer to the hillside? Because now,
That's still a little bit
because
of work
the
in
map
progress.
here has you were coming from above them to go down.
Yeah, that was a bit problematic too, because of the
There'd be
height.
some nice driveways.
So
yeah.
we'll have nicer driveways. It'll be very easy. And the other thing that just occurred to me, frankly, just tonight, is that we will be against that steep slope, and that should provide Hudson Highlands Land Trust with the sort of border they need, which should help. And so if you can look at this, I think you can see graphically that there's much less involvement with steep slopes and constrained land. And if you look down on a similar chart, you'll see that 292,000 square feet went down to 139,000 square feet. It's less than half of what it was before. So that's what we came up with as a road layout. That went back and forth between Fractal and our office as to what could be done. We literally had 4 experienced people pushing and pulling on this road, and they all loved to tell me what I did wrong and fix it. So they got their licks in. The next road is just the next one. It's just, and again, Jen, you don't need to think this. I think this one we can give them later, but this just gives you. This is basically the same road with the grade, with the steep slopes turned on, colored, and the grading, so you can get a sense how the grading is missing the. When you look at this, you can see how the grading is missing the steep slopes, or only minimally invading them. You can see here where we had a series of 5 or 6 stone retaining walls or rock cuts. We now only have 2 lifts along here. The lifts here are smaller than they were on the original plan. So I think this is to show you that how the roads have really been skirting to the greatest possible extent, we believe to the greatest possible extent, any of those environmentally constrained land. The land's over 20%. That's what we did. Certainly, I'm not going to go through the profiles today. This map, there's been several iterations of this map, but this map is the plan that you had with you, or that we had out in the field on that Sunday. Is before we made any of the more recent changes. Now, we made those changes, and what this shows you, the blue hatching is land that will be permanently conserved. I think there was a very specific request for a map that showed that the land that will be permanently conserved. So it has to be really understood that we're still in the development stage, and these lines are still a little amorphous, but they're good. But this is what we showed you with one of the plans that we had, with the density count that we had submitted previously. But you can now see a graphic where the area that will be subject to a permanent conservation easement that will be and permanently conserved are all the crosshatched areas around the entire piece of property. The red being the red being
I
this.
can't see the color.
Okay, sure.
So I.
202, correct?
This is the blue one with a little bit of red.
Yep.
It should be 6, I think.
Unless everyone else can see it, because I can't make it.
No, okay.
Okay.
That's why we bring them.
Thank you. There you go. All right. Glenn, for my sake, I don't know if my colleagues feel the same, could you just restart your description of this slide, please?
Okay. This map that you're looking at now is a map that was based on the plan that you had when you were out in the field.
Right.
It's where the roads that we're wanting to move, and what it shows you is, in cross-hatching, is the areas that will be under the conservation easement. The various hatchings, you'll see some goes upper left to lower right, some goes lower left to upper right, some is colored red. The stuff that goes from upper left to lower right is in the RR zone and in the open space overlay district.
Okay.
The stuff that goes from the upper right to the lower left is the stuff that's in the RR zone, but not in the conservation, in the overlay district. And the stuff that is cross-hatched red is the M zone district. Right? So we've broken it down by district, and we have, and up in the upper left-hand corner, we put a chart that shows, breaks it down, and it shows that where...
No one can read it.
Okay, well, I will
Good.
summarize that. The overlay, the RR zone within the overlay has 122.8 acres. I'm sorry, it has 153.5 acres. I misread it.
Well, it is
When you,
122 here.
when you multiply, 80% has to be reduced, has to be preserved.
Okay.
We get a requirement to preserve 122.8 acres. When we actually have 126.4 preserved, or 82.3%, so we have 2% more, or if I express that as a different kind of fraction, it would be even greater, but, you know. And then, or 3.6 extra acres in the RR and overlay zone. Similarly, we have 41 acres out in the RR zone, but outside of the overlay district, where 60% is required, or 24.6 acres. We have 37.6 acres. And we have, so we're 13 acres, or 31% over in that regard. And that's our sum total for the subdivision, if you don't count the M zone. We have 194, that's not right. There's something wrong with that chart. I got to fix it. But we're over on each case. And what I did on the next chart was assume the, I assumed the, one of those is wrong. I don't know which one. I assumed that the, I assumed that the MM district was rezoned, and it could be rezoned two different ways if the town board if we make the application, if the town board approves the rezoning. It would either be zoned RR, or it would be zoned RR and captured in the overlay. So the next two charts show you that those, what happens if those things change classifications.
I read your notes about that attempt to rezone. Have you made application yet?
No, you have not.
Can I ask you a question? So this is the, before you made these decisions about possibly changing these roads. So
Right.
wouldn't adding those roads to this change these numbers you've got?
Perfect segue. So if we could give them the other one with all the red, that does change it. And what happens?
This straight up and down, so what is
Oh,
that?
that's the equestrian center, but it's still in the RR zone and it's still in the conservation easement.
Oh, it is, okay.
But are you using the phrase conservation easement to be equivalent to it is open space? Because
Conservation
my
easement
picture, your
is-
picture here includes, I mean, you don't have any markings of what, but this looks like it includes
It includes that.
your equestrian center as being open space.
It's in the conservation easement, and I am differentiating it. I'm not equating them.
Okay, but all these calculations are meant to get us to the 80% for the OSO and the
For the
60%.
conservation, permanently conserved.
Permanently conserved open space.
Well, I'd have to check that.
That is in fact, the requirement is permanently conserved open space. That is, I believe that's what we're trying to get to, which is,
I think that's an issue that's been settled with regard to the recreation facilities within the open space.
well, I don't know if it's been settled. Since one of the major purposes of a conservation subdivision is to preserve open space, conservation subdivisions shall preserve at least 60% of the land as open space. Within the OSO district, the minimum shall be 80% open space. Doesn't mean it's just a conservation easement.
Is it define open space?
Define open space is,
I don't know.
I'm telling you, I'm going to tell you what it says.
It's in the memo as well.
An area of land not developed with structures.
It does count that, and we'll look at that again, but I
counts
believe
the
that the
houses.
question has been asked and raised, and the memos have been exchanged between the attorneys as to whether or not the equestrian facility could be located within the conservation area.
That's different. That it could be located in the conservation area is one issue. That it is considered open space is a different issue. The requirement is 80% in the OSO of open space, not an easement.
Okay.
So we need to be very clear about this because we have a density question, we have a percentage of open space question, and then we have a layout that feels in keeping with a conservation subdivision's, what was the phrase, clustering question. At least those are my questions. And so whether you have an easement against a thing, if it has a structure in it, or lands that are manipulated and such, then I don't know if that's defined as open space. And I think that's a serious question. I'm sorry for jumping ahead, sir.
All right. So essentially, your contention is we can't count the barns.
I don't know. My reading of this, and I'm not an attorney, but it says an area of land not developed with structures. I hate this.
Okay.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like it has a lot of ambiguity like the Second Amendment or something.
Okay, good. So
no semicolons, no weird clauses.
Right, so if we really read it, and I'm being, and raise the issue if you like, but my tendency to meet that would be to subtract the structures. But the lawn in front of the structures, I wouldn't subtract.
Except it can't, within 100 feet, it says of a structure, you can't count that area either as open space.
Oh, I think that's on a private lot.
But I don't know what's a private lot in this case.
We need a glossary, yeah.
Yeah, I've let myself debate that too much. I'd rather entertain Neil. So, this is essentially the same map as applied to the map, to the new plan that I'm going to show you in a few minutes. Again, we have broken down the areas by the zoning, and it's essentially the same thing. And in fact, when you look at the numbers, you'll see that our open space requirement goes up a little bit. And so we have 164 acres. There's something wrong with that number. I got to fix that number. So I will have to clarify that number, but we do have enough land that's going to be open space. In the conservation easement, so I'm certain that we have enough extra to account for the buildings.
These are big buildings.
Hmm?
They're big buildings.
Well,
And they have impervious surface associated with them. Does that include the parking lots? Is that a structure?
Good question.
so now the last thing to show you is the plan. There's a couple of folded up plans. I think that's, yeah, there's only a couple. I don't have them all. Yeah, they're bigger. I will check the arithmetic on those charts and get you copies of those larger plans by the middle of next week. So this is our latest master plan. Oh, thank you. So this is the road plan the new road plan that I just went over with you. It shows you the lots. There are a couple that have some issues that have to be dealt with, and we'll be dealing with them. But this is a general sense. For instance, this lot looks like it's on this house looks like it's on some steep slopes, which might be desirable, but we have to deal with a little bit. But basically, we have the lots laid out. We have the equestrian center laid out. We have the roads the way I described them, taken off of the steep slopes and more gentle, easier grades to follow wherever we can do that. The really large difference here, which I hope you find that this effort that's going on since the meeting has been a sincere effort and a genuine effort to remove those potential, mitigate the potential impacts that the plan did show, that when you count these lots, you'll get to 25, and we're not going to seek the bonus. So
quick question. The 25, a couple things on that. The 25, according to those, and very helpful calculations you provided, the 25 assumes you get the M zoning change, correct?
It does.
Secondly, it assumes that in some world of math, 15.004 is the same as 16. Also correct?
It's in banker's math.
It's someone's math. It wasn't in Mrs. Longitano's math for me, but that was.
Well,
but it's someone's math. It's okay. So that's where the 25 is the rounding up plus the conversion of M.
That's correct.
So without you'd be at 22.
Yeah, and what you'll find is that, well, I'm not going to concede that. Okay, that I'm not going to concede that yet. What you'll find is when you talk about, if I use square footage to three places, I think you have a perfectly valid argument. But when you see surveys, you see areas typically surveys to 3 decimal places. 2 decimal places is 400 square feet. 3 decimal places, 40 square feet. Now, if I came up 40 square feet short on an 80,000 square foot lot or a 20,000 square foot lot, that would be unacceptable. So for me to round off to 2 decimal places, which looks like and converts to over 80,000 square feet, but when you look at the 3rd decimal place, it becomes under. 3rd decimal place is necessary.
I'm just saying like 15.004 does not lead me to 16. That leads me to
Oh, it doesn't,
15.
Except that the law says you round up. That law you just quoted a moment ago, I believe it is.
I didn't see any roundup stuff, but we'll get, we can happily debate and discuss, but
It gets to that.
I'll look at
So you're saying round up from a fraction to a whole number?
It says when you come with the bottom number, you round it up. It doesn't say you round it up like you do in math where it's over half, you round it up. Right. It says you round the whole number up as long as you go over the lesser number. Okay. So we guess well, we think we presented a plan that might be deserving, that could be deserving and maybe is deserving of the bonus lots. We feel we understand that's a real concern of the board, and we understand that there is some, we have sensed that there's some sense that there are too many units, so we reduced them. And we've reduced one around the cul-de-sac, the road around the lake, which will give us the opportunity to space the buildings a little further apart. And I don't know exactly where to tell you the other ones are, but they're in the core area. And there are a couple of lots, if you look closely, there are a couple of lots that we haven't provided frontage on. That's going to be a little bit of an issue. We will take care of that. So our goal is to get to a point where you guys can say, okay, this is a subdivision we can consider, and we can start talking about the remainder of the items that you feel should be addressed in Part 2 of an EAF, so we can get that under our belt and get going. Our obvious hope is that we'll avoid an EIS. it's been said by more than one person that the work done in the conservation analysis is a significant part of an EIS anyway, and so if we can, I know for sure one of the additions is going to be traffic, and we're prepared to deal with that, and the others we need to discuss. But we need a sense of the board that we're sort of on the right path here before we start investing the money in the engineering and the additional work that has to go.
So I'm just going to ask you this question. There are 4 houses here that you have located in what you're terming undevelopable land.
I do?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're trying to, I think what she's saying is if you look at this chart, where you have everything red, there are things, buildings, structures, other
These
things.
buildings those are recreation structures that we might have to subtract if you're right, but those are not the houses.
No, of course they're not.
No, but how about lot
This
13?
this one. See, this is undevelopable land. Right? You've got this house, this house, and this house.
Yeah, I can't argue with what it says. But I don't believe, and I'll double check, but I don't believe that we have included any of these houses in our calculations. There are areas within within, let's go back here.
25,
Yeah.
25.
Yeah, that's right.
which is what you're asking for.
He's
Right?
asking
So
for the
22.
22, rounded up to 23,
Fine.
plus 2 to get, if they convert the M to RR.
Right, so that's 25.
That's 25.
So that's what you have here, you have 25.
That's right. That's right. He gave, right.
Incidentally, that 15.004, when you consider the new road lay, it goes up to 15.3.
No, you're clearly right. Fractional units of any size shall be rounded up. That's the language.
I think that you'll find that if you look in the area that we're intending to develop, there will be land on that map that's labeled undevelopable simply because of steep slopes. But that doesn't mean that we can't use that land as part of our lot, and it wouldn't be in the conservation easement.
So you're saying that these houses, where they're located here is not where they're going to be?
Well, I said that before in my discussion about you're correct. When I said there are some problem areas where we have to move the houses around, that's the kind of thing that I was pointing at.
Okay. So, when we get the problem is when you give somebody something visual, they're going to look at it and understand what they're seeing, not what you said.
Yeah, I get the issue. We'll have to differentiate between steep slopes within land that is to be developed and steep slopes with land that is not to be developed.
You won't be building houses on steep slopes, though. You may be building driveways on steep slopes.
There
but-
might be a situation where we come in and we say it's going to be better to go through a little steep slopes or build a little bit of a house on a steep slope to avoid getting to a developable piece of property. There might be.
Not houses.
Yeah, but that's site disturbance, if they can meet that criteria.
But I don't, Kim, I'm not disagreeing with you.
No, I know, I'm
that-
just trying to understand, because you had,
It's analogous, it's not the same code section, it's the same principle.
I see, okay.
So there clearly are steep slopes in the area that we're planning to be developed. Because they're 20%, they're classified undeveloped. We'll just have to make that differentiation in the color on the map. It's to demonstrate it. And I apologize for that oversight.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you this again. So do they count as your constrained land?
Yes. All of that was counted as constrained land, but when we identified the land that is to be in the conservation easement, we didn't count that.
Okay.
And I'm sure I can point out some land up here that is not constrained that's going to go into the permanent easement too.
Just, it's numbers. We have to do our diligence.
So I will be happy to try to answer any kind of questions. Again, we're obviously anxious to move forward, and we think the next step is to get some sort of sense that we've come to something that is worth considering and has respected the land, provided for the conservation area, and that we can move forward with getting on with the rest of the secret process so we can do part 2 and part 3 and hopefully close secret out. And at some point during that process, be developing real plans with regard to drainage, with regard to septic disposal, water supply, real driveway grades. The real grading has been done on the roads already, which I would have preferred not to spend the money on, but it was necessary in this case. I know Mr. Gaynor has a question about the length of this, and we might be able to shorten that road up a little bit and use a common drive to get to two lots and make a little bit less disturbance there. So that's where we are. If Rick, you have anything to wrap it up for me? Thank you.
If I may.
One more thing.
Forgive me.
I understand that some of the actual location or footprint of the houses may move around in the lot, within these lots that you...
The lot lines may move around too.
Oh, okay, that was my next question. But I mean, this is generally what you're thinking in terms of lot lines? This is, I mean,
That's a general
good
thing.
rough in of what you're thinking
That's the
things
rough
will be?
end of what we're thinking, yeah.
All right.
This area, where am I here? These lots, you'll see, have no frontage. We have to solve that problem.
Yeah, okay.
If I may, I think the important thing here is the work that has occurred since the site walk, taking into consideration what we observed, having everything mapped out, and recognizing that the plan we have here is more sensitive, more responsive than what we walked and what we thought we had as a plan previously. That being said, what then the next step for us is if in fact on a conceptual level, and certainly there's details to be worked out in terms of, building envelopes of the lots, we have to confirm the calculations for conservation areas versus open space, all of that, all of those elements we recognize, but the point of it all is this, that after all of the site walks, the analysis and everything else, and the collaborative effort to try to come up with a plan that is sensitive and responsive on a conceptual basis, recognizing that we're at the beginning of the process here. We just want to sense, is this a plan for which we then can resubmit our Part 1 of the EAF? The secret process can then be reviewed in the context of this plan as opposed to the last plan that was submitted, and so that we can then continue to move the ball forward. That's the concept here. And this was done, as you all know, within the last 10 days. And it was an effort that we think was worthwhile. We learned a lot, and we think we're getting there. It's a big piece of property.
How well we know.
If I could just...
Sure.
Thank you for your patience with all this process. I just want to read something for you and kind of go over the fact that this is a massive project, and I have, with my team, gathered a group of professionals that know what they're doing. I think we all know what we're doing, but this is a very large project that probably grew a lot bigger than what we expected to. And in many ways, mistakes are made, and it's all a fluid process. So we appreciate your patience. And I just wrote something that a message that I want to convey to the board. First and foremost, I would like to thank all the members of the Planning Board for volunteering your valuable time and expertise to review these and all other applications that come before you. Your selfless work at monthly meetings, which oftentimes go into the late night hours, and your Sunday morning sidewalks that can become 2-hour hikes through rocky and steep terrain with the risk of injury are greatly appreciated. Your generous commitment to serve on this board ensures that our community preserves its historic identity without opposing the natural course of sensible development. Our application for a conservation subdivision has proven to be a lot more complex than we ever expected, but as it has been said before in this room, this is the first one to come before this board, and it is of paramount importance to get the first one right. It is exciting for us as applicants to think that our work will be part of precedent for the future future subdivisions, and that hopefully we will make this process easier for the board and applicants in the future. I would also like to thank the town's engineer and planning consultants for helping us navigate this process for the past 3 years. Their cordial and professional guidance has proven invaluable to our team. Additionally, we are grateful for all the help and input from the members of our Conservation Board and the Hudson Highlands Land Trust personnel. For over 3 years, our application has been the subject of multiple presentations, public hearings, and workshops. Throughout this process, and while witnessing other applicants, I observed at times the danger of antagonism to develop between the board and applicants. It is my goal to eliminate any potential antagonism where this project is concerned. My team and I see each member of the planning board as everyone who wants to constructively participate as a partner in the business of finding the best possible outcome for our development. We welcome all input as long as it is offered in a cordial and respectful manner. We have put together a team of consultants whose expertise ranges from environmental law to architectural adaptive reuse. We have strictly based our submission on current applicable laws and with the highest possible reach of environmental design in mind. The Hudson Highlands Reserve will be governed by a homeowners association, which will safeguard the integrity of the existing natural resources through legal enforcement of its bylaws. We see this application as an organic and fluid process, subject to change and improvement based on valuable collaboration from all parties involved. As applicants, we also would like to get it right, and we have invested the time and talent of a large team of experts to make sure that getting it right will be the only likely outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to make a comment about this. One thing you said I think is absolutely right. Two parts of it. One is that this is the first one. It may, down the future, may be the only one. And then we do want to get it right. And we don't want to be an obstacle. We don't want to be antagonistic. We want to be cooperative. The fact that this is very complex, the terrain is very complex, as we all know from last week. You're right next door to a property that was a PDD, was the one and only in this town. It took a great deal of work to do that. It took about 6 years for that to get going. I'm not saying that this should be a similar time frame. The significant difference is that this property is a very environmentally constrained area as a unit, as a whole, whereas the property next door, which was a rock quarry, and the reason this exists is because soil mining was attempted to be done here, and we decided to not allow soil mining to go on here. The property next door where Glassbury Court is was already mined. It was almost all site preparation, was almost all done before the development. There are 90 homes there, whereas there are 25 here. So we're fully aware of what we're getting into, and we want to cooperate, and we want to move this along. But we know you've put a lot of work in. This board's put a lot of work in, and our consultants have put a lot of work in. So I just want to know that I don't feel there's ever been any antagonism. People have raised poignant questions to get to the meat of what this ordinance allows. That's where maybe some of the questions have been tough. I think they have to be to get to the base of this. Ron, anything?
I guess what I would offer, just based on where we've come to date and the presentation tonight, as the board's aware, we'll be checking, and my office will be checking in on the issue of permitted density, just to walk through the drawings themselves, go through the calculation just as the applicant has, and within the next week, we should be able to validate permitted density based on the site plans and your ordinance. And we'll also be able to check in on the open space that's been presented. We're actually going to do this, we'll do that on the revised plan, so we recognize where the applicant wants to be. So you should get some understanding, in a little more than a week, as to density and open space, just to know that we're both we're both on the same page with those issues. I think within the next month or prior to the next meeting, I will work with AKRF, and we'll go through another detailed review of this revised plan and understand its compliance with the conservation findings and the issues identified during the site walk for the prior layout. And we can provide that report to you at the next meeting. And from that point, you may have sufficient information in which to move this forward and initiate some hard review of seeker, if that satisfies the board.
If anybody else on the board has something to say, and we can wrap it up. No, Steve?
Well, the only thing I'd say two things. The first thing is, I think what the applicant's asking you is, putting aside the multitude of issues that you're going to have to go through to get to issuing an approval on this, and with the understanding that those issues may result in some potential changes, what does the board think of this layout just as a concept? Is this the type of thing that you have major objections to, or are you just not ready to speak about it now, or is it something that you like? And they're talking about going ahead with a potential zoning change on this, which is going to, I can't speak to the cost of it, but it's certainly going to take some time and effort to go through the town board on it. That is going to complicate your seeker review because, A, you're adding another approval to it, and B, you're doing a coordinated review, so you're going to need to bring in the town board, and you're going to need, if it's coordinated review, you're going to need to make your secret determination before the town board can grant the zoning change or enact the zoning change, I should say. So I think, again, just in broad brush strokes, without it being binding or anything like that, if the applicant's looking for a little feedback on this plan, and again, if the board's not, if you're not comfortable with it now, you're not in a position to do it, that's fine. But I think if you are in a position to, or if you feel you can give them your thoughts on it, that would be helpful.
In light of that?
So when you say, are we comfortable with this plan, is what you're looking for, do we think 25 houses is acceptable? Is that what you're looking for?
Well, for starters, yeah, they say they're going to not seek the density bonus, which is one thing. And is 25 about in the ballpark, or do you think they need, they're allowed a certain number once you have your density calculation. I mean, unless there are constraints that prevent it, pretty much by right. This is the number they're allowed.
So the open space issue, resolving the open space issue should help that,
It should
correct?
help with that. I think they're going to have enough open space anyway at the end of the day, whether we count the buildings and the space around them or not. I could be wrong. We'll have to confirm.
I'd like to reserve that statement until we actually do the analysis.
Okay.
I think that's a fine thing to state. They believe that, and I think that's fair. I think that's the purpose of having AQRF and Ron to do that. I think that's a worthwhile thing, and I think there's some conversation to be had that marries up this chart, which is the new red one, which we just got, with the map. that has other structures and things on it that are being considered part of the red. So I'm sorry to ask you, Steve, but I'd like to reserve that till we,
Completely understand. What I'm hearing, it sounds like the board's not comfortable making a
well,
comment one way
that's
or the
me.
other.
I mean, if we're trying to poll the board here, I'd leave it to the
No,
chair
I'm
to
not
say how
saying
he wants
poll.
to.
Just if the board feels like they want to, I wouldn't force anybody's opinion on it one way or the other. It's just if you feel you can volunteer it, that would be helpful. If you're not ready to, that's fine too.
Peter?
Well, it's going to be a multi-step process. We had the first iteration, and we went for a site walk, and it became very clear that that was not going to be something that was going to happen. I mean, so we have a new iteration here, which looks like it addresses certainly the steep slopes and a lot of the roadways, brings them back down into some of the valley land, if that can be called valley land, but looks like it might address, we might suddenly start having wetland issues, because in the middle of that valley there's could be intermittent, could be perennial wetland. All of this dendritic drainage here comes down to the pond, so I don't know if that's going to raise new issues with the Conservation Board. But if Ron goes out with the Conservation Board, or a member thereof, that would seem to be, they could say, this works, this doesn't, this doesn't. We have at least 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5 that are in undeveloped land. And they'll say, no, can't have those. So it'll be part 2, as far as I can see. It does look like it's been a fairly serious change here. So part 2 will be interesting to see. That's my
Okay.
2 cents.
Neil Tobin?
I was glad to see the change. I think that in general, I think to answer your question, I think we've gotten over some basic questions. We've gotten through the shared roof issue, and now we've gotten some layout. We've got a better look at it. I say, sure, go ahead. Let's start putting it to the the Conservation Board, the EAF, and the Sea Corps, and the engineers, and see what shakes out.
Dave?
Yeah, I agree that this is a good step. It's a really good step. I'm concerned about the count, the house count, that needs to be, gone over by Ron here. And, there's some of those technical issues about, one of the things I noticed when they did the count to get it up to 25, right? You took it from the overlay land, and you bump that up, right, to the next digit, yes? And then the one that without the overlay, and then you added those up, but there was, I think it was in this document here from Keen and Bean, where it's talking about the fact that that should actually only be done after everything, that going up, that rounding up should only be done after you have added the whole situation up. I mean, each one, do you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying this very eloquently, but what it did when I did the numbers was it dropped the house, the initial count of 25 down to 24. And that didn't count any of this yet to be zoned stuff either.
We're changing the M district?
Yeah. So, those kinds of issues could make a difference of at least a house or two. And I think those need to be.
There are two, I'd just like to make 2 points in that regard. And I fully recognize, I am the culprit who did that. All right? So I want exactly how I reasoned that. I looked at going, and maybe Rick may have made that point for me because I made it to him before. If I go into a bank and I open 3 savings accounts, and each one comes out to 12.6 cents in interest, I get 13 cents on each account, or 39 cents. I don't get whatever that 37 cents because they added the interests together and then rounded it off. You've put me, speaking of the town, has put me in 3 different zones, 3 different accounts. So from my perspective, as someone who's got a little bit of education as an accountant, that's a perfectly logical way to approach it. That's the way the bank does. Now, I recognize that what you say of adding them up at the end and merging all the accounts together may get you a different thing. It may not, because now we have a little bit more land that may change that calculation a little bit and keep us rounded up. But that's my logic. I looked at it as 3 separate accounts that are tallied individually, rounded, and added up. And the other thing I want to just say with regard to the reason I don't think you'll find a plan that didn't segregate those 2 M zone lots out of the count somehow. And I was aware of that possibility, but I think if you look back on the report you got from AKRF specifically said that we would be obliged to increase our conservation area by all of the area in the M zones. So she was basically saying, Susan, who I think authored the report, that because you have M zone in the property, it all has to be conserved. And that seemed a little one-sided. So what I did was calculate those 2 things and figured out that since that's reasonable enough. I won't put any houses there, but we could, since we have to conserve the land, we might put the houses in the area where we could put the houses. Same thing. So it's not without some thought, and it wasn't without making that obvious to you on the calculations in the charts. So I will welcome getting that settled as well.
Neil, do you have something?
My only 2 comments are, one, if you're looking for feedback that's explicit and direct, and appreciate all the comments about getting along and going along, I think what I focus on is the specific tactics of implementing this zoning code. And I would say, if you wanted me to say what I felt comfortable at this point, I'd feel comfortable with 22 homes from what I've seen. From the calculation, I do not feel comfortable saying go assume the M is buildable. And I would ask that we go through a real process, as I said earlier to our attorney, to really understand what is counted towards whatever the mixed percentages you have to hit. I don't know if it's 75 or 74, whatever the percentages you've got to hit that mixes all the property together for open space, because I am not comfortable from what I'm seeing that I understand sufficiently that we've hit it. I know there are differences of opinion, but I think I think the code is a little vague about what counts as open space. The sentence to me seems very clear, but I think we really do need some time on that, because again, to our chair's point, I feel a real obligation to get this right, and that is not about harassment, it is not about tough questions, it is about the law, and I feel obliged, as do all my colleagues here, to do that.
We come to the realization that I don't think we're disagreeing here. You're coming at it from one side of the table, I'm coming at it from the other side of the table. We welcome to get that done. And we weren't looking for something very specific. We recognize we got to come to a number that's justifiable and agreed upon, that's within the law. What Mr. O'Rourke, I believe, was saying was that if we erased two or three homes got 3 homes and got down to 22, we'd have your number. But the layout would be generally the same. It'd be a little more spacing or a little more, some couple more holes. And have we done that to the point where we can start moving? We can start thinking that we've got a concept that was working. That's what we're really looking for in a general sense. That's what we're looking for.
Okay, Ron, a little guidance here on the next step.
Yeah, well, as I said, I think the board is anxious to understand how this respects the concerns that came out of that sidewalk and how it addresses the conservation findings, and that's exactly what I propose we will AKRF and I will do in the intervening month. I'll also have tied down the issue of open space requirements and density. So at the next meeting, you'll have that determination. We'll have a detailed review of this revised layout and how it addresses the concerns that the board has raised to date, as well as how it complies with the conservation findings. So we'll have those basic issues, I think, addressed. And at that point, I believe you're going to be much more comfortable in attempting to move this forward.
I'd like to get a sense from the board members about the M zone piece. So we have about 11 acres in the M zone, and we would like to file for a zoning change based on the idea that we want to conserve land, and that this M zone will not be developed ever as an industrial or commercial land. So based on those things, we think that it makes sense for us to apply for a zoning change. And we don't see a possible, I mean, we hopefully, maybe it's just wishful thinking, but since the general sense is to conserve land, we don't see why the town board would not allow us to change that zoning to what we need to get the number of lots that we want. So if there is a sense that from the planning board that is not a good thing to change the zoning, and that will probably be a hurdle for us in the future.
That's up to the town board. That's not within our purview.
But the board does understand, just based on the layout of the town's zoning districts, that the frontage of the property is in an M zone, right, an industrial commercial zone. It's the intention of the applicant not to develop that at all. Does the board have any concern if he pursues a zoning amendment to eliminate the M zone?
Personally, I have no problem with it, especially with so many acres around it.
Right.
That this small parcel be approached the town board to make it part of the larger parcel, that's my opinion.
Yeah, and we understand that it's up to the town board's discretion, but it has been, it has to be, and it has been expressed here that that area is not a given. So that would give us 24, but Mr. Zuckerman said, well, we cannot, yeah, right?
I'm not in the town board, I don't know how, I mean.
All right, so, but, yeah, you mentioned that because.
There's a town board member right back there. You want to ask him?
All right,
Yeah.
so,
Maybe you can pigeonhole him after the meeting
I
and.
think one of the points is that it will never be used as industrial, commercial.
Yeah, I guess I've been through so many of these kinds of applications, and I think the important thing here, and the planning board knows this, and we're not, this is not, it's without prejudice. I think what the property owner is saying, look, I want to rezone this property because I want to do this conservation subdivision, and I think that this property that I own doesn't belong to being zoned M, and I want to use it for the purposes of this conservation subdivision because it makes sense. It makes planning sense. I guess his question is, and it's without prejudice, he's saying, as we all know, the town board's going to ask you. They're going to go to the planning board. They're going to say, okay, we're the town board, we're the legislative body, we have discretion, we can do, you know, as it's been said, it's good to be the king, you know, we can rezone property. And I think the purpose of the question is, what do you think? We're not saying take a vote and hold you to it, but we're just saying, what do you think? That's what he's after. And that's a good faith request of a property owner saying, hey, look, if I do this and I want to go forward with this, what do you think? Am I out of my mind? Am I rezoning this for, you know, nuclear dump? No, I'm rezoning it for purposes of being part of this project. And I own the property. That's all. And I'm not asking for a vote. I'm not asking for an opinion. I'm just saying informally, what do you think?
That's good, because I don't think you should get one.
Okay.
I think that Kim's absolutely right. It's the town board's purview. There's not even an application for a zoning change pending it's really not something this board should wade into, at least not unless they're asked by the town board.
All right, well, they will be asked, okay.
Well, if they are, but until then, I don't think it's
We
appropriate
have been in the
subject.
past, so, I mean, I fully expect they'll ask for our opinion,
Whether they, and they may not listen.
and they may not listen. I was advised that the architect,
Do we need to tell you to do anything? Do we need to make a motion?
Rockman Berquist is here. James?
Hello all, I'm sorry I am late. I thought I was at the end of the meeting, so. So what I've prepared tonight is just really kind of a formalization of what we've met on site to review, which is the...
Sorry, we're just gonna organize ourselves here a second.
Okay, sorry. Should I just give you a minute?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, give us a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
We don't usually go this late.
As Neil asked before, when Ron goes for the site visit and to walk with the conservation officer or whatever, would we, as planning board members, be allowed to attend that walk? Okay.
Does that get noticed? But does it get noticed? Ron, you go walk by yourself with them?
I gotta
Is
show
that
you
a
this
notice
too, but it's
thing?
really bad. Maybe
No,
I do
it's
need
not.
some stuff. You get me really. I don't know how I'm gonna have time to go see a doctor.
Not at all, it's just, I'm sure Susan
No,
and
you're
I
right.
will walk that.
You're right. I gotta do it.
ourselves, just to check in.
Is everybody, can we settle down for a couple minutes now? James?
Yeah, we're just trying to clarify something.
Oh, sorry.
All right, James, let's do it, man.
All right,
Come on.
what they did to me.
All right.
Oh,
I saw you walk in, buddy. I saw you sneak in.
We're gonna start now.
Steve?
It's not Steve, it's Ron.
What?
It's not Steve, it's Ron.
Ron?
All right, James.
Okay, so just to review what we had met on site and walked through, we've got an updated plan. I'll get you copies of this shortly, but I wanted to continue the conversation to make sure that that we're on the same page in terms of what we walked through and reviewed together. So this is mapping out the buildings, still yet to be finalized in what their actual proportions and design to be. But the groupings are as I had flagged out on the site and you had reviewed. I also have some updates to show where the required turnouts are going to be added to the driveway, but the driveway otherwise will not change. So really just here for any comments or feedback since our site visit.
On behalf of the board, I had transmitted to you the comments that were offered at the site walk. You did receive those?
Yes.
Do you have any issues with the comments that were offered?
No, the comments were, I think, very constructive and agreeable.
Okay. That's basically all we need to resolve today. The hope is that as you revise your plans and resubmit, we'll take those documents, we're going to make a referral to the volunteer fire department.
Right.
And then move forward the overall process.
Great.
And if there's any changes from your redesign to the EAF Part 1, the short form, just
Great.
submit a revised document on that as well. If it's not necessary, that's fine.
Great. Very good. Okay. That's it.
That's it.
Thank you all. I told you to be fast.
Is that it?
I think that's it.
Any further comments, final comments on anything? Anybody? Motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.